Just like communication between people is important, effective cellular communication is also critical. Cell communication is similar to how we talk to each other. There is a sender that delivers the message or signal, and a receiver that receives that signal. Problems can arise if the sender doesn't deliver the message correctly, or if the receiver doesn't even get the message in the first place. Fortunately, miscommunications between cells are very rare because this can severely compromise cell functionality. There are three stages involved in cell communication. The first stage is the receiving of the signal, called reception. Just like you and your friend talk to each other, cells also talk to one another. But instead of using words, a signaling cell sends its message to its target, called a target cell, in the form of a signaling molecule. The signal itself is received at a receptor protein. Once the molecule has been received by the target cell, it triggers a series of steps that help decode the message, called the signal transduction pathway. Transduction, which is the second step in cell signaling, is the overall process of converting a signal to a form that the target cell can understand. This is like your friend hearing you talk, and then their brain translating and understanding your words. The final stage of cell signaling is response, which is when the target cell responds to the signal received. This is like your friend's response or action to your words. Hopefully they understood you correctly. In this lesson, we'll focus on signal reception. We'll cover transduction and response in detail in other lessons. Cell signaling is a very specific function. When you talk to your friend, someone else can easily overhear you and intercept your message. But this is not the case with cells. Target cells have the receptor proteins, and these proteins have the very important job of receiving signaling molecules. Likewise, signaling molecules are shaped so that they fit into only certain receptor proteins, like a lock and key. You could say these two really are made for each other. Because the signaling molecule specifically binds to another molecule, we call it a ligand. When the ligand binds to the receptor protein, it causes the protein to change shape. What this does is allow the protein to interact with other cellular molecules, starting that chain reaction down the signal transduction pathway. It's like flicking the light switch in the receptor protein from the off position to on. We find receptor proteins in two places within the cell. Most often they're found in the plasma membrane, which is like the skin of the cell. Because they're found in the cell's membrane, we call these membrane receptors. Receptor proteins are also found inside the cell, and we call these intracellular receptors. Ligands can easily reach membrane receptors because they're on the surface of the cell. The types of chemical signals that reach membrane receptors are quite varied. Some allow ions, like sodium and calcium, to pass through to the inside of the cell. Others play roles in things like embryonic development, vision, hearing, and fighting disease. Ligands that bind to intracellular receptors have to find their way into the cell, going past that outer plasma membrane. These types of ligands meet up with their matching receptors in the cytoplasm or the nucleus of the target cell. The ligands are able to reach the receptors inside the cell because they're either hydrophobic or are small enough to pass through the plasma membrane. Steroid and thyroid hormones are examples of ligands that bind to intracellular receptors. Effective cellular communication is essential to cellular functionality. Reception of a signal is the first step in a three-step cellular communication process that allows cells to talk to each other. If the signal isn't received correctly, the target cell certainly can't decode the message and respond to it. Signaling cells act as the communicator in a conversation, sending out a signaling molecule called a ligand. These are molecules that specifically bind to another molecule. In this case, the molecule that it binds to is a receptor protein located in the plasma membrane or inside the cell itself. When the ligand key is turned in the receptor protein lock, the rest of the communication process can move forward. It's like the protein has been turned on, which triggers a pathway that decodes the message and allows the target cell to respond accordingly.